Yesterday, June 12th, 2026, it was announced that G2's AD carry Hans Sama would officially extend with the organization to 2028. Now, this is following a trend of most organizations re-signing their key players, most notably MKOI, who re-signed head coach Melzhet to 2028, Alvaro, their support player, till 2028, and finally and most recently, star captain jungler Elyoya till 2028. But really, the trend was officially kind of the reason why Hans Sama re-signed, as many will say, was because Karmine Corp officially re-signed Caliste until 2028, which was a bit controversial. Many thought that Caliste, who clearly had massive interest from G2, should have waited until his free agency in order to re-sign with Karmine Corp, because even if that was his intention at the end of the day, if he waited to see what G2 was going to offer, he could have maximized the offer from Karmine Corp. Now, maybe, in my opinion, Karmine Corp expressed, hey, listen, we are actually giving you the maximum offer we can possibly do. So no matter what G2 offers, we cannot go bigger than this. And I believe that to be true because it is evident that as much as Caliste wants to stay with Karmine Corp really wants Caliste to stay. To the point that I had messages from my previous videos or comments in my previous videos of people letting me know that the reason why KC signed Yahoo and even previously signed Kana is because their goal is to go to international events so that Caliste specifically can get international experience. This entire roster is centered around Caliste, right? And as we see in this article about Caliste's extension, G2 again expressed interest. And this is nothing new because back in 2024, which is absolutely ridiculous because Caliste hadn't even been in the LEC just yet, G2 made an unprecedented offer to try and acquire Caliste just before he debuted in the LEC in 2025. So quick recap. KC signs Caliste, I believe, in late 2023. Because it was just before MKOI joined. So yes, he gets signed just before summer 2023, wins LFL and EMEA Masters with the organization, is going to debut in the LEC with Karmine Corp in 2024. However, the LEC makes a last minute change to their rule set, which makes it so that the age requirement to play in the LEC went up from 17 to 18, meaning Caliste had to stay in the LFL or in the ERLs for one more year. But even still, Karmine Corp promised him a starting position in 2025. So all of 2024, despite it being pretty much a disaster for Karmine Corp, which in hindsight was actually so good for Caliste's career because I don't think Caliste alone could have saved Seiken and Cabochard's kind of poor performance and Bo, yada yada. Long story short, Caliste, even in the ERLs, was drawing this much attention that not only did Karmine Corp believe in him, but G2 makes, literally, if this is to be believed, an unprecedented offer to exchange Yike, Mickey, and Hans Sama on top of a huge buyout for Caliste. 3 players and a buyout just to get one rookie AD carry that had not proved himself at the LEC level just yet. Ridiculous offer, right? But in hindsight, both because of clearly how talented Caliste is, winning LEC in his debut split winter 2025, and everything that he's been able to accomplish to this day, runner-up positions and being the focal point of the roster, and probably, in my opinion, at the very least top 2 AD carries in the LEC right now. And finally, the second example that I give in terms of G2 kind of making the right call here, G2 also made the risky call to sign Skewmond, right? Even though they had Yike for 2 years. Clearly, G2 is trying to invest in the next caps. And what I find extremely impressive about that is they're also looking towards not just mid lane positions, but they found Skewmond and secured him. And honestly, I could say Caliste is the AD carry equivalent of Skewmond, and Skewmond is almost the jungle equivalent of Caps. G2 is trying to create an Exodia roster, very similar to also T1, which is the first time I'm making that observation right now. T1 with Faker at the center. They got Zeus, they got Keria, they got Gumayusi, they got Owner, right? They built this like Ninja Turtle roster with Faker as like how am I dropping the name? Master Splinter, right, in the center to teach these 4 proteges how to become absolutely stellar players in their role, right? The last kind of key detail that I want to mention here is that in this article about caps extending in 2027, I might have talked about this in previous videos, but basically Caps had this kind of scary situation, not for him, but for G2, where he was in the middle of 2025, still had not re-signed with G2, and many were speculating that he was going to explore the market, could have gone to a number of teams, right? Imagine Caps joining MKOI, right, and uniting with Elyoya, what that could have looked like. Some were speculating him to join Fnatic, which was an interesting idea. I don't obviously fucking dodged a bullet if he was ever considering that. But even the idea that Caps could go to KC, right? In 2025, right? KC would acquire Busio. There was obviously an opportunity for, if Caps went to KC, they could have also got Inspired, right? In 2025, Skewmon did not look like he does now, right? There's just a lot of different opportunities. But Caps ultimately extends to 2027. And I remember when I read this article, they talk about, or they really get, it must have been in a different article then, where they got direct quotes from Roma, G2's general manager, who is a big part of these roster decisions and negotiations. He expressed, or Caps expressed, that G2 was promising him really big opportunities in the future. That is why in a previous video that I made on this channel, I showed you guys a G2 inspired video that I had made, or it never got released. But the idea behind that video was that G2 was, in my head, I thought that G2 was promising Caps inspired, and that's why he stuck around, and then that ultimately fell through. And I was like, well, there you go, right? Like G2 failed Caps at the end of the day. But clearly, or according to some in the comments, they let me know that actually what Roma had promised Caps was Caliste in 2026, which they ultimately failed to acquire, right? So really G2 has been centering, like it was like acquire Skewmon, and the next mission, the sole mission of G2 was acquire Caliste. And unfortunately, they failed to acquire him once again. And now we get back to the main story of this video, which is Hans Sama extending till 2028. Now, I have been a huge Hans Sama doubter for years. One of my biggest dreams, I talked about it at the end of one of my videos talking about, in my main channel videos, talking about G2 letting go of Mickey X. I personally was a huge, like, I was like, get rid of Hans, because I think Mickey was world-class caliber, and I didn't believe that Hans Sama was. And I was thinking, get Upset, for example, who has, one, proven that he can carry late game, like, truly no other, in my opinion. And also, so I thought he was also world-class. I thought you put Upset on G2, and holy shit, this roster just goes flying. I think ultimately I was wrong for a reason I'll get into in a second. But ultimately, they recommit to Hans Sama, and now this year, in my opinion, I have been absolutely glazing Hans Sama, because in my opinion, and this actually reminds me a lot of Gumayusi on T1, or previously on T1, now on HLE, I think a lot of people really neglect, everybody looks at the scoreline, right? A lot of fans look at the scoreline, and nobody looks at, well, what did the other players on the team do to get that primary carry, to get that scoreline, right? So for example, Keria, best player in the world in like 2023 or 2022 or whatnot. Well, why was Keria able to play unique picks? It was because Gumayusi was a unique type of role-playing AD carry who was able to take a step back, not demand resources, so Keria could roam and connect with Owner, play for Faker's lane, etc. But you can only do that if you have a strong AD carry who is able to weak side for you. Similar situation with Damwon Kia, or really Damwon Gaming when they won Worlds in 2020. Ghost was not a stellar AD carry, but he was able to play weak side and stabilize the game so that Canyon and Showmaker and Nuguri could absolutely dominate, right? I think that is such an annoyingly underrated part of a team. And Broken Blade and Hans Sama, I'm just throwing Broken Blade in there because I just wanted to be clear that I also feel this way about him. These two players are weak siding beautifully so that the focus can be Caps, Skewmon, and Labrov, right? Labrov is only able to leave lane and connect with Skewmon and carry games because Hans Sama is solely 1v2ing in lane. I'm going to bring up one key example. So this game is where Skewmon played Olaf, and it wasn't just the Olaf that absolutely demolished this KC draft, right? I mean, it obviously was the key pick. It was able to get onto Caliste and Busio despite all the CC from the Ashe Seraphine, but it was also Labrov who is setting up these freaking amazing, what is it? Go through.
As well. Phantom Darts are cracking and Hex Optics already complete for Caliste as they look to try and shut him down before the fight can start.
I completely forget what that ability from Bard is called, and I literally know what it is, but it's fine. It was plays like this. It's Labrov connecting with Skewmon. Oh, this part's so dirty. Watch this awesome Q from Skewmon Flash Q. Bam! Gets a wonderful kill, and then the play doesn't stop. Look, it's Labrov and Skewmon. Labrov gets the ultimate, he ultimately whiffs it, but they're able to save BB here at the last second. And then look at this. Look how they continue forward. Now, obviously, it's also Caps connecting with them too, but it is Skewmon and Labrov that are constantly together. Look, you'll see in a second, they continue the play. They don't even stop. They're insane. Oh, well, actually, it's the next play. Hold up. Sorry. Just give me 1 second. It's like right here. Anyway, you get the idea. I literally think a role player like Hans Sama is so ridiculously underrated, dude. The way he's able to absorb pressure. Faker's able to absorb pressure so that the key carries of his team, like Zeus and Gumayushi at the time, right, when it was the Zeto FGK, that was only able to happen because Faker was absorbing pressure. He wasn't the best mid laner, but he was absorbing pressure. And especially for a player like Hans Sama, who used to be the polar opposite playstyle, for him to be able to pivot like that, to me, is ridiculously impressive. Again, he was someone, I actually, literally, you guys are going to call me crazy. I was the one who was saying, Hans Sama, I wanted him to, if he had to get rid of Mickey X, I wanted them to pick up Hylissang, which would have been a disaster most likely, but I wanted Hylissang because I thought Hans and Hilly would actually be a fantastic pairing because the two of them are incredibly meticulous when it comes to the details of lane. They probably would have been an insane lane dominant 2v2. And I think they would have had some pretty good synergy. Again, in the grand scheme of things, probably would have been a disaster. I don't think Hylissang would have agreed with how the rest of G2 wanted to play, but that's besides the point. So, overall, I think Hans Sama, I honestly want to go out on a limb and say, I think Caliste would not function on this roster. You would have too many cooks in the kitchen. Caliste is thriving with Busio because honestly, ironically, KC is kind of like old school Fnatic at their best. They play through their star AD carry, Caliste, who is very similar to Reckless, who literally could not play for Fnatic because he was too young and then still had a promised position to the EU LCS once he was of age. Exact same story as Caliste, and now he's on freaking KC, and the whole game plan is centered around their AD carry. They pair him up with Busio, who is fantastic in lane. They are literally, in my opinion, as much as Hans and Labrov, I think have strengths elsewhere and are obviously ridiculously impressive, and I think all pros should be top 2 in their role. The goal of this team is not to play necessarily through bot lane. It's to play through mid and jungle. And that's what Labrov plays for. So I think if G2 picks up Caliste, would Caliste be able to weak side? I don't know. It's not an I don't think so. It's just an I don't know. I don't think it'd be playing to Caliste's strengths. And honestly, a year ago, I would have told you I don't think it's playing to Hans Sama's strengths. I think someone on paper, Flacken would make sense on this roster, right? Someone who is really good at weak siding, playing his position, and then popping off later in fights if needed. But Hans Sama is showing the ability and willingness to pivot to that playstyle and completely outperform what you could imagine Flacken could do. And I only mentioned Flacken because he's like the one and only weak side AD carry that I can think of. So anyway, it's just super fascinating. I think a lot of people are underrating Hans Sama, and I hope I am making that clear in this video. I think he's phenomenal. I honestly think if you throw Caliste onto this roster, I think it would start to create a little bit of tension between Skumon and Caliste. I don't think the two of them would function perfectly together in the same way that BB and Hans being willing to sacrifice their resources to play for Skumon functions way better. Even look at Caps. Caps is willing to play things like the Annie, in that Olaf game as a great example. But even in the LEC finals that just passed, he had a really key Annie game. I think while what was Skumon playing in this game? He played, was it the Pantheon? It was the Pantheon. Caps played oh my god, excuse me. Caps played Annie. Skumon was able to then play Pantheon, and there were so many situations where Pantheon was only able to thrive because Caps would go in first, do a shit ton of damage, CC, and then die, and the play looked terrible, but that's easy cleanup for Skumon. Dude, even Mad Lions in 2021, again, so many people just think, put 5 players, the most talented players together, but they don't realize what weak side, or I want to even find a better term for it. It's just like, the players that are willing to sacrifice look like shit in order for their other players to thrive. It's so underrated, man. Again, Mad Lions in 2021, I believe it was Armut and Karzi that would go in first, especially Armut with the Gnar and the Wukong, right? Who would go in, do a shit ton of damage. Karzi would go in with an Ezreal, Eve forward, do a shit ton of damage, and die so that Humanoid and Elyoya could clean up the fights, right? And so Skumon, much the same. And don't get me wrong, he's a fantastic playmaker. But in this game, it was a fantastic example of Caps being that initial damage dealer and the damage sponge, getting a lot of the key spells out of the KC players so that Skumon could come in and clean up the fight. So, long story short, this video is supposed to be about Hans Sama. I just want to give Hans Sama his flowers. The final thing, too, that I think is really cool is Caliste said on the LEC podcast that him and Hans Sama are actually very good friends. They're both French. They're both they both talk about the game together. Obviously, probably not giving too many key details away, but they are good friends who want to see the other succeed and support each other. I think Hans Sama is a massive catch, and dude, this is such me changing my tune. I don't mean to be such a G2 glazer. I am not saying it for any other reason other than this team is absolutely impressing me. Absolutely impressing me. And I just think there's so many underrated things that other people don't talk about that I think deserve some highlights. So Hans Sama, I think at the end of the day, you are actually what G2 needs. And if we ever need you to step up and be the carry and have all resources put into you, everybody knows we can absolutely rely on you to do that as well. So anyway, I'm going to be big time looking forward to Hans Sama at MSI. I believe he's going to do a very good job, both doing his job and carrying as needed. The last key detail, which we could talk about in a future video, is that Broken Blade and Labrov have not re-signed yet. And that's very interesting to me. I don't know. A lot of people are really hyping up Knock Knocko. Obviously, I do think BB today is so much more valuable than Knock Knocko, but maybe G2 thinks that if they can get Knock Knocko into their ecosystem, that they could level him up over time. That absolutely could be true. His laning is absolutely phenomenal, and you know, maybe he could learn to play the other parts of like team fighting and maybe like weak siding, role playing, side laning better through the G2 ecosystem. Who knows? The big one is support. I don't know who G2 would be targeting as to not re-sign Labrov. Interestingly, and I actually want to talk about this in a future video, Paris was originally what G2 was centering the 2025 build around, because Skumon and Paris had a phenomenal synergy on BDS Academy, but the problem was BDS still had Paris under contract. Meanwhile, Skumon was a free agent, so they couldn't restrict him from going to whatever team he liked, but they could put the brakes on Paris getting moved. And BDS was like, yeah, if we had to secure anybody, we would secure Paris. Big mistake. It seems like Skumon was the real driving force between that synergy and ultimately the right move for G2. But I don't know if G2 is like, we're trying to reacquire Paris. I don't know if they want to get Mickey X back. That would be my dream. But obviously, many have mentioned that Mickey X's work ethic was the issue as to why G2 let him go and Fnatic let him go. Maybe he has some attitude issues. I don't know. And I truly don't mean to over-speculate, by the way. Anyway, you know what? I will talk about potential support options in the near future. I just don't want to ruin the retention of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I should have put a fucking call to action for you guys to subscribe. I keep forgetting. That is what I'm trying to say, guys. Please subscribe. I don't give a shit about subs. I just want to get to 1,000. I love you guys so much. I will talk to you soon. I actually am going to record another video right away because I should post way fucking more. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.